Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're back for part 2 of the family films to watch at Halloween. Top 10. We've already done 5 in part 1. Go, check it out. Let us know what you think in the comments below that video. But sit back, relax, and let's see what else we've got in our bucket for the rest of this top 10. Check it out. Check them out. Right, so we've covered, let's just check out, so we've done 5 so far. We've covered 5 so far, so halfway through. I will shut up soon, but let's just bang it through. 5. So let's jump to another one. So we've talked about fairy tales and those sorts of things. So, I talked about authors. Let's hit a few authors as well on this one. There's 3 on this list I want to talk about. So, keep it in line with kids' stories and kids' horror. The popular one is Goosebumps from 2015. It's a very recent book, but R.L. Stine and his Goosebumps books, which date back to the early 90s, have been hugely popular, probably more in the States than anywhere else. I had a few when I was a kid, but Goosebumps with Jack Black and that is a great film. It's a real meta film, actually. A kid moves next door to a house, moves next door to R.L. Stine and his daughter, and through a series of events, opens one of the books, and in doing so releases these characters that R.L. Stine has created onto the world, from Slappy the Puppet through to the Wolfman and evil gnomes and all kinds of things. It's very madcap, and probably not as dark as some of the others. This really leans into the comedy and the fun, but it's definitely a fun film. It's a good film, and it's a good Halloween film. It really does sort of like top off with some excellent special effects and Jack Black performance. I find the older I get, the more I like Jack Black, because I find that he can be quite a nuanced actor that really falls into this dark comedy place. I think he gets underestimated. Like, you know, I've seen him do wacky zany comedy, you know, fart jokes and all that kind of stuff, and I've seen him do the drama and I've seen him do horror. I mean, yeah, I really think Jack Black is actually an underrated actor that I would love to see him do a full-on dark role, go up the full, like when Robin Williams did like 1 Hour Photo and those sorts of films. It was a real revelation. So I think that's the way. But yeah, Goosebumps from 2015, cracking film. But I also suggest check out and highly recommend the Goosebumps books from R.L. Stine. Okay, next one. So this is a bit of a shift, but we're going to stick with kid horror. Is Roald Dahl. Now Roald Dahl, known for Matilda, The Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, James the Giant Peach, The Twits, one of my favourites. All these books, and all these books are very sort of like, you know, they've got that dark-ish but British humour, the Roald Dahl humour that is to be expected. But of all these, he did a book which it took me a little while to read. I was a bit older when I read it. But has got that a real dark tone to it, more so than any of the others really, and that's The Witches. Now The Witches was made into a film in 1990, and it was made by Nicholas Roeg. Now the reason I'll tell you about the director for this one is because it's quite important. So Nicholas Roeg, I think his name is Roeg, directed Don't Look Now, which is a film with Donald Sutherland in, about how he loses his daughter, and it's got a whole psychic. You know, he then moves to Venice, and it's whether or not these people are psychic and can see him. It's got a whole serial killer sort of subplot. It's an amazingly slow burn film from the 70s. It's awesome, but it's got a real eye for it. Like he's a fantastic director. He also made The Man Who Fell to Earth with David Bowie, so you can see that this guy's got a real eye for doing something a bit different. And this film is no different from that. This is a real set piece. The story itself is quite simple. That sort of it's another young boy. That's why these films work so well away, because there's a lot of youth in these films. But a young boy finds out that a coven of witches are gathering together at this hotel, and he needs to sort of like basically stop them, and that sort of, and you know, prove to the world they're there. And halfway through, gets turned into a mouse and still has to do his job. It's typical Roald Dahl craziness. Now, the reason that this film, I want to highlight this film as leaning into the horror more than anything, is Angelica Houston as the chief witch in this is brilliant. Angelica Houston had a real sort of rush, I think, in the sort of early 90s. Things like this, The Addams Family, Addams Family Values, in this horror area, and she's brilliant. There's a real, like, she's, you know, in the majority of the film, she's kept as the sort of like, you know, the attractive sort of austere sort of Angelica Houston kind of look, and you've got all the other witches there as well, all looking from like bubbly old women to young women, but they all look human. And then when the reveal is given, like they take off these masks, and implausible faces underneath are hidden beneath these sort of plastic, obviously magic, and they are vile. Long noses, straggly hair, sort of like green eyes and warts and all this other stuff, like real typical looking witches, but with the best prosthetics. It's amazing and horrific. They're horrifying, these things are, and it's amazing, it's brilliant. And The Witches has got that, keeps that Roald Dahl sense. And I find that people talk a lot about the original Charlie Chocolate Factory, comparing it to the modern Tim Burton one, which one is better. And I find that sort of they're the two that really get talked about. But of all the Roald Dahl films, Matilda was a fantastic success. I highly recommend Matilda. But you've got Danny Champion of the World and all these others that don't get talked about as much, and I think The Witches is in there, and it should be revisited. If anything, I think The Witches is one of those that seems to have been lost a little bit, forgotten about, especially on a lot of this list, and I really think it's worth revisiting. Like, crack it out. You can get it on disc. It's actually on, I think it's available on Prime at the moment, but go and check it out. It's a great film. Okay, The Witches. We're down to a couple more. It's got 3 more. So, the last of the sort of the author books. So, Ray Bradbury. When we say Ray Bradbury, we often think about his sci-fi work, Fahrenheit 451. Can't remember now. I'll just check. There you go. 451. I've got it right here. Ray Bradbury 451. And these other things, these classic books. But he's not forgotten. He also wrote horror. Just a couple, but he wrote some great horror. And one of them is a book called Something Wicked This Way Comes. He wrote this and released it in 1962. And so 20 years later, in 1983, it was made into a film. Now, it's a great film. It's set in sort of Dust Bowl, sort of late Depression era America, I think. And it's having seen it, it's early Stephen King is the only way to describe this. If you were to think Needful Things, it's about the devil giving you what you desire, but there being a price for it and all that kind of thing. And this circus rolls into this small town, and it's telling you that it can give you that, whatever you desire. And there's always a price. You've got to do something for the devil, or Mr. Dark in this case. And these kids come across it again, having that youth element. The young kids that come across it and unearth it and are trying to, prove to the world for what it really is. It's a fantastic book. Again, I've got it. I've only read it a bit in the past. I'm tending to read it this year. I really highly recommend the film. That it's really dark in places, and it's got a great thing. It's got a great 80s feel to it. And again, there's a reason why this film isn't as readily available as it probably should be. And that's because it's a Disney film. Now, in the 80s, Disney went through a bit of a dark patch. They created all kinds of films that they were trying to do something different. They've been known for the light-hearted animation and the sort of those live-action films with Kurt Russell doing all kinds of things. They wanted to try something different. You get to The Black Cauldron is one of those sorts of things. Even like Basil the Great Mouse Detective, slightly darker sort of animated films. But they also made some live action films. And Something Wicked This Way Comes from 1983 is one of them. And I almost think in this day and age they're almost a little bit regretful for having gone down that route. So it's not hugely readily available. And having considered how much Disney is really pumping into its remakes at the moment and re-releasing stuff on Blu-ray, I think this should be revisited. I really do think it should be seen again. So track it down if you can. And Bob Iger, if you're watching, and I know you do, dig this out. Let's have a copy of this. Please. I think it would look, if this was all polished up, it would look amazing. So that's Something Wicked This Way Comes. Really cracking film. Final two, top two. Now the top two on this are something special. I've left these to last for 2 reasons. They're possibly one of my favourite films. The first one we're going to talk about is from 1993, and which is a good year for these kinds of things. It's Hocus Pocus. Now, Hocus Pocus is another Disney film, but this gets a lot of push. Now this is a great film. In fact, I've got the disc here, and I'm going to sort of hold this up because it's a great film. Now, Hocus Pocus, 3 witches. Again, going back to that thing I said with Paranorman. A town that has a history or a legend of these 3 witches, the Sanderson sisters. And they've sort of like, you know, lived on that. The legend's about, maybe not as making it as commercial as they do in Paranorman, but there's still the legend there, and the kids all know about it, talk about it in school and all this other stuff. Anyway, a kid moves from California into this town, and he sort of, you know, trying to make friends, but he doesn't. But it then cracks onto this girl, and she sort of, you know, ends up taking him to the house where the museum is for the Sanderson sisters. And this whole thing is, if you sort of light the black candle, a virgin lights the black candle at a certain time, it brings back the witches. He ends up doing it. It does, and then they've got to get them back into the book. This is what I say. This is important from 1993. Omri Katz does the thing, and I've talked about him quite a lot recently. We did Matinee on a Patreon review recently. He's great in that. I've got a podcast discussion on Erie, Indiana coming up in a week. And that's another one where he did good. So this sort of period, 91 to 94, Omri Katz did a lot of work and then sort of disappeared. But Hocus Pocus, he's cracking in it. But the real treat in this is the Sanderson sisters. The three sisters are awesome. Bette Midler, I'm going to have to get the names out. Bette Midler, Sarah Jessica Parker, and where is she? Vanessa Shaw, Thora Birch, Omri Katz, Kathy Najimy. There you go. Kathy Najimy. Nahimi? I can't pronounce it. The three Sanderson sisters are awesome. Bette Midler in this is spot on. She chews the scenery like mad. She even gets to do a song at the end, Put a Spell on You, which is a corker for a Halloween party. And they just work. They're a great little team. They're incredibly funny. They're very distinct characters. And they're just so much fun. It's such a good fun film. It sort of, I think, predates the television Sabrina the Teenage Witch for having a talking cat in this, which again, an immortal talking cat, excellent. It has a zombie in it. Robert Zombie literally has to cut his mouth open to talk, played by the ever fantastic Doug Jones. Everything from Star Trek Discovery recently, The Shape of Water, Pan's Labyrinth. So many things. The man is the man's like a ballerina of prosthetics. He's amazing. But yeah, Hocus Pocus, it hits all those beats. It's incredibly predictable, this film, but it's perfect for it. The performances are awesome. The script is pretty good. It's dated in places. Also, this has reference to the Necronomicon from the Evil Dead in many ways. The spell book that the Sanderson sisters use is bound in human skin, and that's mentioned, and it is seen, and the book has an eye that opens. Now, it's played a little bit for comedy, but the fact of the matter is, when you're older and you're watching this, you're saying, all I can think of is, yeah, well, that book is bound in human flesh, and the thing that's given it sentience is the spirit of the person whose flesh it's bound in, which is freaky. So there are dark touches like that, and they tried to burn the witches alive in this, and there's all those sorts of, like, you know, harkening back to the Salem witch trials and all that kind of thing. It's a corker. I mean, there's a reason that Hocus Pocus has probably been in print consistently on DVD and Blu-ray since 1993, is because it's that good. It's the quintessential kids Halloween film, and I highly recommend it. So crack it out, find it, track them down. So that's 9, and we're going to go for the top one now. Top one. Now, it's less, I'm just going to put it up here, it's probably less of a Halloween film, but it's also my favourite film. It's in my top 3 films of all time. They alternate a little bit depending on the time of day. But from 1984, Ghostbusters. Now, Ghostbusters is an absolute corker of a film. 3 parapsychologists, or actually no, a psychologist, parapsychologist, and a physicist create a ghost hunting team, and are then joined by Joe Schmo, a proper civilian in Winston Zedmore, to create the Ghostbusters. And I talk a lot about the Ghostbusters because it's such an awesome film. I watched this probably week in, week out from the video store for so many years when I was a kid, and it scared the crap out of me at times. The opening scene in the library where the ghost goes to the zombie effects. Taxi Driver at the end creeped me out. All kinds of things. This film is amazing, and it's an introduction to horror comedy, and done well, because you've got in this film some of the greats. I mean, written by Harold Ramis with Ivan Reitman and Dan Aykroyd, directed by Ivan Reitman, and contributed to the script. Performances from Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, Bill Murray, SNL alums, and you've then got all the special effects, which some are slightly dated. Some of the Slimer effects probably have dated a bit, but even down to the groundedness of like Sigourney Weaver and stuff, as Dana Barrett. This film is as I say, it's my favourite, but it's my favourite for a reason. That this film has got what I consider to be perfect progression. So it starts with idiot psychologists, parapsychologists looking into this thing at the library, and builds up to an event where they are taking on, and no spoilers because it's a film that's over 30 years old, taking on an interdimensional godlike being in Zool and Gozer, and end up taking on a 100-foot Marshmallow Man, and it makes sense. As far as I'm concerned, like there's a couple of leaps of logic probably against the way, but I follow it and I love it. This is a great introduction to some of those elements that will take you on to other things. And the reason I say that's Ghostbusters, so that's my 10. I just want to give one quick overview of all this. That when looking at these films and we sort of see why they're so fantastic, they lead into other things. So anything from like the witches and the witches and sort of like Ghostbusters and the Corpse Bride, and you have that sort of like gothic sort of horror through to like let's say Ghostbusters or Paranorman and Monster House, where you've got slightly darker elements, but you've also got like horror comedy, but straight through to like and Goosebumps, but then straight through to things like these are introductions to like Stephen King with Monster Squad and Something Wicked This Way Comes, who also introduces Ray Bradbury. All of these are fantastic books, so I highly recommend checking out these top 10. This has been the 20th Century Geek Top 10 family films to watch with kids. I'm going to wrap up there. So, if you like this video, let us know in the notes down below. Subscribe, let us know what you think. Check out the podcast. We're available in iTunes and all these other podcast catchers. That's 20th Century Geek. We're also on all those social medias. Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram. Check us out. Let us know what you think. And of course, if you like what we're doing here, check out the podcast, but also check out our Patreon page. We've got lots of other content going on over there. Videos, podcasts, blogs, the works. We're all talking pop culture in the 20th century. Okay, thank you very much, guys. We'll catch up again soon.